Today's lesson I've titled Timer Tools. You've heard me talk a lot about timers. It's our primary tool here in Unchained Writer. 60-minute timer. Amazing what we can do with a focused 60 minutes, isn't it? This is just one timer tool that I use in my personal life. I swear by timers for so many things. And I want to kind of give you a little brief history of how I uncovered timers and their importance. They almost seem so simple that if we're not careful, we can dismiss them as overly simplistic. I mean, heck, this is what I do with my young children when I want them to clean up their room or something. Hey, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes, see how much you can clean up. And all of a sudden they go from, oh, I don't want to clean my room to, oh, it's a game. And they're always amazed. They beat the timer. The entire room is cleaned up. What they thought was going to take hours and hours of time, when focused, only took really a few minutes. Now, I want to think and talk about action versus feelings and thinking. So we all as creatives arrive at this point where we don't feel like doing the work. We talk about that a lot here. Motivation, willpower. Sometimes we feel motivated. Sometimes we have high willpower. What happens when we don't? What happens when we know we need to work on a certain thing, but we don't feel like it? We're not motivated despite having the best goals, despite having, you're bored with your pictures and all of your inspirational things. You know that doing this work is going to get you the results that you want for your life, your future self, all of these things. But for whatever reason, you're just not feeling it. How do you move past those defeating thoughts, lack of energy, exhaustion, and you just don't feel like doing the work? Most people, and I did this for many years, they try to think themselves into a better state, which if you're a very skilled thinker, maybe you can do it. But I've found that many times that doesn't even work, because when I don't feel like it, I don't even feel like thinking myself into a different mood. So you can just try and think different thoughts. The one thing I have found that almost always works is not thinking, but action. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because, okay, that's the point, Joe, is I can't make myself take action because I don't feel like it. But what if you could trick yourself into it? Just like I tricked my kids into cleaning up their room. They don't feel like doing the action. They don't feel like cleaning their room, but dad tricks them into it. And all of a sudden they start taking action. How can we trick ourselves? I think we can do this through timers. It is a magic tool. For those of you who use timers, you know this. But let me prove it to you. There was the famous TED Talk that Amy Cuddy did about the power of action, how that action relates to our feelings of motivation. And maybe you've seen this TED Talk. If not, I highly recommend you look it up. Amy Cuddy, again, just Google Amy Cuddy TED Talk. This is one of the most popular ones there is. There's millions of views on this thing. But what they found is just people who get in these high power poses, just their body language, versus low power poses. What happened was amazing. So as you can see from the top row here, these are power poses, confident pose, the way that people stand or sit when they're generally confident. And they took two groups of people, they had them sit or stand in this confident type pose for 2 minutes. And then they had another group who sat or stood in these low power poses for 2 minutes. Now, what's interesting is after just 2 minutes, the high power pose group's testosterone levels increased 20% and their cortisol levels decreased 25%. The high power group was found to be more willing to take risks than the low power group. Interesting, right? Increased testosterone makes us more willing to take risks and be assertive, while decreased cortisol makes us less anxious and less stressed. Now, as for the low power pose group, they had the opposite effect. Their testosterone dropped 10% and their cortisol increased 15%. Just 2 minutes led to these hormonal changes that configure your brain to basically be either assertive, confident, and comfortable, or really stress reactive and feeling shut down. 2 minutes. This was not thinking their way into more confidence. This was acting their way. So it was the action of just moving their body in this way for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Pretty interesting, right? So that alone is a tool. But what if we could take this same approach and put it into acting in a way that we actually move our projects forward. And when we don't feel like it, what do? We use some timers. So remember, action itself is the best starting point for more action, while trying to think your way into more motivation is an unreliable and ineffective way to create forward momentum. So we know that to be true. So how do we trick ourselves into action? Well, let me talk to you about these timer tools. Okay. The first one, the countdown starter. When the timer runs out, you must start your task immediately. This reminds me of the Mel Robbins 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 approach. This, I think, works best with a very short amount of time. So I'll use this in my personal life when, let's say, I know that I'm kind of procrastinating to get started. Maybe I'm scrolling through Facebook and I all of a sudden have that moment where I'm like, I should really get started. Give yourself a 60-minute countdown, or even, hey, if you're struggling that 10-second countdown, 5-second, whatever it is, something short, and say, once that timer goes off, I'm gonna get started, period. Just that simple countdown does something and kind of tricks you into that action. All right, the next one, the decision countdown. You must make a firm decision before the timer runs out. For this particular countdown, I like to use somewhere between 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe 25, depending on how big or small the decision. Sometimes we don't get started on a particular project because we're not clear on that project. Sometimes we just need to make some critical decisions to move forward. So take some time, set a timer, say I'm gonna give myself 10 minutes. I'm gonna exercise all of my options. I'm gonna grab a piece of paper. I'm gonna write down the pros, the cons, everything I need to know about this decision. I need to write down, maybe brainstorm and journal a little bit about why I'm stalling on this decision. What are the consequences? And remember that not making a decision is still a decision. So go through all of those things. And when that timer's done, make your decision. All right. I've used this many times. The third one, the focus timer. That's what we do here at Unchained Writer. For X amount of minutes, you must focus on one task of your choice. Strict rules for distraction. You're not going to switch gears. You're not going to check email. You're not going to accept, phone calls. This is one task for X amount of minutes. Extremely powerful, as you know. All right, another one that I use frequently, the Pomodoro technique. This is where you work for 25 minutes, you rest 5 minutes, you repeat. You do 4 cycles of that. That is technically a Pomodoro. After that, you take a little longer break, half hour, an hour, or whatever. Sometimes just those 25-minute bursts of extreme focus with a 5-minute break where you get up, you stretch, you take a drink, you go to the bathroom, whatever, get a lot done. Much more, I've found, than just winging it and say, I'm just going to work for a while on this thing. Plus, you sort of gamify it. It's fun to check off those 25-minute sessions and to really just kind of see the progress being made. And lastly, the work and play carousel. Work for an hour, relax for an hour, and repeat. Sometimes this is just what you need. It's the perfect balance of really focused work, but with a huge reward on the other end. I've used this for certain projects, ones that are a little bit more draining, to where I know that I can really give it my all for 60 minutes, but then I get a full 60 minutes to relax. Now, some of you, I know what you're thinking, probably the same thing that I thought was, this sounds dangerous. This sounds like there's way too much relaxing going on here. And it depends on the type of work, I think. Many times I've found that with very focused time, let's say you did 3 of these in a day, 3 focused hours, 3 hours of relaxation. You're fully recharged with your relaxing, and you're going to be fully focused with those 3 hours. How many of you have had short amounts of time where you get more done in an hour than you would maybe all afternoon with unfocused time? That's sort of how this works. Extreme focus, but then extreme relaxation. So those are some timer tools that I've used and continue to use over and over and over again, depending on my mental state, my emotions. When I'm really struggling to have the willpower, I don't feel like doing the work, that's when I turn to these timer tools, because I know that action produces more action. And once you get started, you know how it works. You start to feel like actually doing the work, and you didn't before. Just like those power poses, this is sort of power poses in action, and you can trick yourself into action by just using these timers. It doesn't feel so bad when you say, all right, I'm just going to work till the timer runs out. I know I don't have to feel like it, but there's an end in sight. After that, you can renegotiate. You can, set more timers if you want, recommit, but at least you've got that focus time in. All right, so I hope that helps somebody here. Anybody that gets to those places where you just don't feel like it, motivation has run dry, willpower is used up, go through the list of timer tools, pull one out, try it for yourself, see if it doesn't work.